ESPN Plus. I'm Sebastian Salazar. Great to be with you. A full show today. In just a little bit, we'll be joined by Stevie Nicol, Stuart Robson, Craig Burley. Going to look ahead to both of the tantalizing matchups in the FA Cup semifinals on the weekend. We're going to hear from Herculez Gomez as well, discussing MLS is back, plus tons of highlights from the NWSL, from the championship, where Leeds United are coming back up to the Premier League. But we start this show just as we started. Messi had some interesting choice of words here. Said, beaten for intensity and desire, as he said Barcelona were for much of the season. He also said the team were weak and inconsistent. These are harsh words from Messi. What's been the reaction?
Yeah, it was extraordinary to see. And in part, the reaction has been, as you just pointed out, what Sport did, which was to use his own words, because there's not really very much we can add in terms of the analysis of what's going on, in terms of an analysis from such an authorised voice. In fact, the most authorised voice there is at Barcelona. It was quite something to see him say it. The way in which he said it, the sense that he looked like a broken man, he looked like he'd absolutely had enough. And so, if you like, the next step in terms of how people received what he said last night was, first of all, to take on what he said in terms of the content of it and to essentially say, well, he's quite right. And then to discuss what this means in terms of the consequences of what he said. Because there's a number of things in there that I think are very significant. There's the suggestion, for example, that the players have to be autocritical, or self-critical rather, let's try and speak English properly, shall we? So the players should be self-critical, but that this was a broader club-wide thing. The suggestion that everything has been bad since January, and of course it won't have passed people by that January is the month in which they sacked Valverde and brought Quique Setien in. The suggestion that if they don't change, they will not win the Champions League. In fact, not only will they not win the Champions League, they will not even get through the game against Napoli. It was an incredibly pessimistic analysis, it was an incredibly direct analysis, and it was one that I think leaves absolutely no doubt as to the understanding, the belief, the idea within the dressing room that this team is in an absolutely dreadful state at the moment.
Sid, one more thing that Messi said. If they want to be competitive in Champions League, they'll need to see big changes. We're taping this Friday night, Spanish time. Could that big change be Quique Setien on his way out before the Champions League in August?
Well, I think the fact that he said, as I just mentioned, that everything has been bad since January, which is when Setien comes in, I think is a very telling remark. I suspect that it wasn't his intention to be quite so direct about Setien personally, but I think there's no doubt that he feels that is part of the problem, although not the key problem, because of course the very fact that he's talking about everyone, the very fact that we saw that Barcelona weren't playing well when they sacked Valverde is the reason they sacked him, even if they were top then and have lost the league now. I must admit, I think if there was a plausible alternative, I would not be enormously surprised if Barcelona took that decision. Bear in mind, there's quite a lot of time now between the end of this season and the beginning of the Champions League campaign, albeit Barcelona have to play Napoli, which means that they restart quicker than others. The question mark there, though, is what is the alternative? Who is the person they can bring in? And bear in mind as well that it's only, I think, 3 days now since Josep Maria Bartomeu, the president of Barcelona, said, I expect Quique Setien to continue next year. We want him to complete his contract. He still has a year left on that contract.
Sid, we had Jules on the show yesterday. I think I've given Jules a couple times to take back all of his criticisms of Ernesto Valverde. Remember, this guy did win La Liga titles for all the catastrophic failures of Champions League. Is anyone around Barcelona prepared to admit that getting rid of Valverde, as aesthetically unpleasing as it may have been, was a mistake?
Look, I think some people are thinking that now, but I think in fairness, it's important to contextualise this. I don't think that many people really lamented the departure of Valverde. I think the disappointment with it, I think the anger with that decision was the timing. I think it was the way in which it was done. I think even if you look at it now, there will be a lot of people who said, well, doing it the way that they did it, doing it with the failure to get a replacement in, because bear in mind that Setien, and you know, this isn't intended to be dismissive of Setien, but Setien I think was their third, maybe fourth, maybe even fifth choice. They tried Xavi, they tried Thierry Henry, they tried Ronald Koeman, they'd spoken to Pochettino as well. He was the fourth or fifth choice, and so that tells you that they weren't ready to make that change. They weren't prepared to have everything in place to make sure it ran smoothly. Now, I think most people now would look at this and say, well, this shows that Valverde was very good at keeping a lid on crises, very good at keeping things calm. But that's not necessarily to say that he should have continued. It's just that he should not have gone at the moment in which he went and in the manner in which he went and with the replacement with which he was replaced by.
Let's talk long-term future at Barcelona and put yourself in the shoes of a Barcelona fan. Like, where is the cause for optimism with this team? If they get rid of Setien, it's the third manager they've had in the last season. You look at a team that hasn't played well. The future doesn't look bright. Messi is even talking about potentially leaving. Is there hope for optimism with all the chaos at the management level?
Well, look, I think there is. And the reason I think there is that at the risk of sounding overly simplistic, look at the Barcelona squad. There's a lot of good players in there. Now, we've talked endlessly. We've analysed over and over again the dependency upon Messi, how significant he is, how at times that's problematic for the club, how at times it shows that there are big flaws in the squad. But you're still looking at a squad with a huge amount of talent in there. We're still looking at a squad that before this season won 2 league titles very comfortably in a row. We're still looking at one that, yes, as Messi said during his talk yesterday after the game against Osasuna, he said that Roma hurt, that Liverpool hurt, that they hadn't given the fans anything. But they were a goal at Anfield away, or even just protecting themselves by 1 goal at Anfield away from almost certainly winning a treble last season. You know, they lost the Copa del Rey final, they didn't make it to the Champions League final. I think had they got there, they would have probably won it. Now, obviously, that's partly supposition, but there is... I think there's enough there to believe that there can be some optimism. I think the bigger problem from Barcelona's point of view wouldn't necessarily be looking at the squad, wouldn't necessarily be looking at the manager, be looking at the institutional crisis and thinking, where does this end? How much worse does this have to get before something is done? Bear in mind that we're a year away from presidential elections, and I think that, possibly more than anything else, is the thing that will most worry Barcelona fans.
Sid, you and I were on the show the day that the news broke that Messi was stalling his contract talks with Barcelona. At the time, you didn't sound convinced that this was necessarily the first step on his way out. But given what's happened in the last 24 hours, are you moving at all on that?
No, not really, because I think when you listen to him yesterday, he was asked directly about this. He said, look, now's not the time to talk about this. It did sound, I must admit, like someone who was thinking, well, you know, I don't even want to talk about this now because, I'll lose control of what I'm saying. You know, I will say something I shouldn't. I will make things worse. But I still think that his position on his future is about a determination that this team must compete, about his discomfort with the board as it currently stands. And in any case, the suggestion was already that this was something for the end of next season. By the end of next season, as we've just talked about, some of the solutions should be in place, or at least some of the beginning of a change in board of directors, a change in president, a change in structure, a change at institutional level, which is what Messi needs most of all. By which time, of course, Messi will also be 34. So who knows if at that point, Messi might anyway be thinking about retirement, regardless of everything that's going on around Barcelona, which, of course, as he made very, very clear last night, he is absolutely furious about.
Right then, Sid, maybe we should actually talk about the team that won the La Liga title on Thursday, Real Madrid. How did this happen? Because I remember it was almost a year ago this week, them losing here in the United States 7-3 against Atletico Madrid in the preseason. Not just how did it happen, but how did it happen without really any significant contribution from Eden Hazard, who was the one guy they brought in the summer to be the big hit?
Yeah, well, I mean, part of the answer actually goes back to what we did start the show with, which is Barcelona. Of course, by definition, any league title race is relative. It's about who you're up against and about how they perform. You look at Barcelona's points total, it's the worst that it's been in over a decade. You look at the number of points with which Real Madrid are going to win the league, it wouldn't have been enough to have won the league in the last 2 seasons in which Barcelona have done so. You look at the return from lockdown and Barcelona were 2 points clear. So Real Madrid have had an absolutely fabulous run-in during lockdown of 10 wins in a row. But had Barcelona been able to continue winning, of course it would still have not been enough. So you have to put it in the context of Barcelona's collapse and crisis. I think in truth, you also have to put it in context of that lockdown. And Zidane, Sergio Ramos, Florentino Perez, the president, have all said this. They've all said that there was something about Real Madrid that was slightly different post-lockdown. That said, of course, Madrid had had a better season than in previous years because they came back from lockdown still within touch of Barcelona. In previous years, by March, which of course is when we stopped playing, they'd already been way, way, way out of the title race. So it changed in that sense. Let me take it to New York for you. As you say, that was the day that they were beaten. They conceded 7 goals against Atletico. Hazard, Bale, James, 4 most expensive players in the Real Madrid squad. 4 of the 6 most expensive players in the club's history. And their contribution between them, on average, is 9.5 games and 1.5 goals of those players. Now, in Hazard's case, it's different because he was injured. The others have just been frozen out. The others have really not had a role to play. You look at the players who have had the most minutes in the team. The top 9 are all new players. The 10th is Mendy. The top 9 are all old players. The 10th is a new player, Mendy, a left back. Now, he's been important, but not massively important. He shared the minutes more or less with Marcelo. I think what we've seen with Zidane is a return to the old guard, a return to his trust in the players that won 3 Champions Leagues. And maybe there's a lesson here for Barcelona. You asked me a minute ago, what's the reason for optimism at Barcelona? The optimism is they've got a very good squad. Real Madrid looked to be in a mess 12 months ago, but the optimism was there were still good players in that squad. Even if it was an ageing squad, even if it was problematic, even if they weren't scoring as many goals as they used to be, even if they didn't have Cristiano Ronaldo anymore, there were still things there. And what Zidane did, of course, was connect to the squad as he always had done, emotionally, tactically look at what he could do plausibly in terms of building a structure that would work, that would protect them. And then, of course, in the context of a season in which neither Atletico Madrid nor Barcelona will ultimately feel like they reached the kind of figures in points that they would have hoped for.
You mentioned the long list of big names that haven't produced for Real Madrid, but surely there are players this season who have. When you look at a championship team, usually the most valuable player is pretty obvious. Who's the most irreplaceable player on this Real Madrid team? Because for me, it's not so obvious.
No, I think you're right, and I think it's very interesting to look at the Real Madrid team and talk about who have been the big performers. And as I say, I do think it's very difficult to do this analysis properly, precisely because of the fact that we've had kind of 2 halves of the season welded together kind of awkwardly. You know, the two bits of the season don't really fit together that well. And so if you look at Real Madrid as a whole over the entire season, I think you would say the most consistent performers are probably Casemiro and Karim Benzema. If you look post-lockdown, Sergio Ramos suddenly stood up and became the leader, became the key player, and actually we saw a return to form, a return to really brilliant form of Luka Modric, who hadn't been hugely important earlier. Earlier in the season, the player that gave them the most freshness, the most drive, the most sense of there being something new about them was Valverde. But the ultimate feeling, once the season's been over, is that perhaps he wasn't as important as we first saw in that middle part of the season. And then, of course, there's been Courtois, who had a difficult time in the autumn, but I think has been absolutely brilliant from about November onwards. And I think, in a way, maybe that's the key to this success. We've had really big contributions at very important times with a very steady team. You look at the numbers, and I think it's basically a spine of 7 or 8 players who played almost every game, who played over 30 starts in the 37 games they've played so far this season. And I think that's been the basis of it, that players have stepped up when it's really mattered. Here's a stat for you, which I think underlines that really, really quite clearly. Of the Real Madrid squad this season, 21 players have scored goals. Only 2 outfield players in the entire squad have not scored this season in La Liga. One of them is Brahim Diaz, who only played 59 minutes, and the other is Militao, who's the backup central defender.
Let's focus in on Zidane for a second, the work he's done as the manager. Interesting comments yesterday saying that the La Liga title makes him happier than Champions League. I mean, that sounds kind of counterintuitive for everything we know about Real Madrid. Are you buying what he's saying, and how do you explain it?
I am 100% buying what Zidane says, and I think this is a key part of this as well. It's of what Barcelona had done in winning the league, and that was Zidane. Zidane, who won 3 Champions Leagues in a row, felt that wasn't enough. He felt like there was always doubts about the Champions League winning team, that La Liga was the proof of how good a team you really were. It was the most objective measurement of how good a team really was. And he was trying really, really hard to change the culture at Real Madrid, to say to them, look, it's not enough to go and win a title like the Champions League where it's 12, 13 games, you get through it and bang, and we've won it. I want the competition that proves that you've been the best over the course of the season. That's every single week for 38 weeks over the course of the season. That's what will show we're the best, not the Champions League. There's even a quote from him back in March. He says, listen, 12, 13 games, we need to break away from that mindset. We need to be 38 games, bam, 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 every single week. That's what we need to do. And at a club like Real Madrid, that's a big ask. Because, by the way, at boardroom level, at fan level, at player level, that doesn't necessarily fit with how they think. And what Zidane has done, and a big part of his success, is to try and change that mindset. Now, this is where I'm going to slightly contradict myself. In fact, I'm going to contradict myself a lot. I've just talked about Zidane changing the culture, about Zidane changing the mindset, about talking about a league title that's 38 games. I also think, in truth, as I said right at the very start, that we have to look at the context of lockdown here. And that what happened, of course, was that Real Madrid came back after lockdown and were confronted by a tournament that now looks a lot like the Champions League. Here's 11 games. The title is just there. It's tangible. It's just in front of you. Just get through these games. And they did.
See, there was a time when Zidane's reputation as a manager was basically just that, a man manager. You look at the work this year, though, it's getting harder and harder to argue, not just that he's among the best managers in the world, but that he's not the best manager in the world. When do you think he'll shed that man manager image?
Well, I mean, the amazing thing is that he still hasn't, even with this title race. I think there are a number of reasons for it. Now, first and foremost, let's start with something very basic. Zinedine Zidane has won 3 Champions Leagues. He has never not won the Champions League so far. Now, obviously, that could happen this season. He has been at Real Madrid at 5 seasons, but it's actually 3 complete seasons and 2 parts of seasons. In those 2 parts of seasons where he came in late, once in January and once in March, he couldn't win the league. In other words, in the 3 seasons in which he could have won the league, he's won it twice. He's won a trophy every 19 games at Real Madrid. I mean, his record is extraordinary. And you're right, and there is still this slight resistance. There's still this idea that he's only a man manager. Now, let's start with the basics, shall we? First things first, only a man manager, as if that was easy at a club like Real Madrid. As if that is all it takes. We've just seen at Barcelona how difficult that is. This is one of the accusations people made about Valverde too. Only a man manager. Well, he won 2 league titles. The people who followed him didn't. Zidane won 3 European Cups. The people who followed him didn't. Zidane has won 2 league titles. That's 2 of only 3 that Real Madrid have won in 12 years. So first things first, let's have a bit more respect maybe for man management skills, which is a huge part of modern football. But the other part of this is if you watch Real Madrid this season tactically, they don't look like the Zidane teams that won 3 Champions League in a row. They look different. Obviously, they're likely to without Cristiano Ronaldo. But they score far fewer goals and concede far fewer. They've solidified. They've looked at their limitations and been aware of that and worked around that. You look at the tactical variations this year. We've seen a team play 4-3-3. We've seen them play 4-5-1. We've seen them play 4-4-2. We've seen a 4-2-3-1. We've seen him shift through those formations. Yes, we've seen a stability of players that play, and it is the old guard. But I think we've seen tactical nuances that we didn't see there before. We see a team that goes and wins the ball much higher up the pitch. We see a team that's much more prepared to bring the ball out from the back, that doesn't go long from the goalkeeper as often. And at Granada, for example, we saw that very, very clearly. So I think we are seeing these things, but we still do get, and I think you're right, that idea that, well, it's about the players. And do you know who is most guilty of not making this about Zidane? Who is most guilty of always talking about the players as if it's easy to manage this squad? Who is most guilty of basically undermining Zidane's role in all of this? Zinedine Zidane is. And that is part.
That means Arsenal and Manchester City from Wembley, and then on Sunday, Chelsea and Manchester United. Actually, there we'll start Ole Gunnar Solskjaer saying it's not fair. Chelsea with 48 hours more rest than Manchester United ahead of the showdown on Sunday. For more, we welcome in Craig Burley, Stevie Nicol, Stuart Robson. Craig, I'll start with you. Is Ole incorrect? Is it fair?
Well, it's not ideal, but, you know, and I'm sure if it had been reversed, Frank Lampard would have been saying the same thing. But unfortunately, you know, because of this shutdown that we've had, there is no ideal scenario. So it is what it is. But I think United will still be in good shape come the game, to be quite frank with you. They've, over the head-to-head this season, they've had the upper hand on Chelsea. They had some squad rotation at Crystal Palace, which they managed to get a result. They've got a front three that's on fire. And Chelsea have looked a little vulnerable or a lot vulnerable defensively. So, yeah, I mean, the extra days rest are important. But as I say, with the league fixtures coming thick and fast because of the lockdown, it's a scenario that really couldn't be avoided.
Stevie, on this show, Shaka always says never give players an excuse or else they'll take it. Is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer making excuses here for his players?
I don't think so, no. Listen, I kind of agreed with what Shaka said because I actually believe that. You know, if you tell them, if you don't tell them, but if you make it clear loud enough and long enough, then they'll start believing. But the fact is that right now, Manchester United players, every single one of them wants to be on the field playing. The way they're going forward particularly, everybody wants to be a part of it. Everybody wants to get goals. Everybody wants to get involved with Bruno Fernandes and the return of Pogba. So, listen, the last thing that United players right now are thinking about is being tired. All they want to do is get in that starting 11, and that is part of the reason why United are so successful right now. Every single player is busting a gut to get in that team.
Robbo, your perspective? I wonder what you make of what Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has said.
Well, I think he's given the players a slight excuse. I would say never mention about tiredness. Just going back to what Stevie was saying, yes, every player wants to get in the team. My word of warning for Manchester United would be, in the last 2 games, I don't think they've earned the right to play. Particularly against Southampton, they thought they could come out and play from the back, and Maguire and the other centre-half, Lindelof, could get hold of the ball and play into midfield, and Southampton pressed them. And it was up to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer to come out after 5 minutes. They bypassed that press, and go into the front, and then we'll earn the right to play to get Bruno Fernandes more space. And they did it a little bit against Crystal Palace. I'm sure Chelsea would have looked at that. So it's important that Manchester United earn the right to play and go that little bit longer to start with, force Chelsea back, and then there'll be space to play out from that. Then they can get it into Bruno Fernandes. Then he can go and pull the strings and get those front 3 into the game.
All right, gentlemen, let's make some predictions. Always a good time to embarrass ourselves. Craig, I'll start with you. Who are you taking in this one, and why?
Well, I think both teams are pretty evenly matched, but they're a country mile off the guys at the top. But Man United have had the upper hand. And, I think with Chelsea's problems, and there have been problems at the back, there's 2 centre-halves and the left back and the space that could be in behind. The defensive midfield's been an issue as well. I'm going to go for Manchester United because I think out the 2 sides, they look a little bit more compact at the moment.
Stevie, United or Chelsea?
It's got to be Manchester United. The way they're going forward, particularly Martial and Rashford. Yes, against Palace they were a little lacklustre at the back, but when you've got a strike force that Man United have, they're going to score goals against the Chelsea side who've forgotten how to defend. So Manchester United.
Robbo, you going to make it unanimous?
I'm going to make it unanimous. I think that Manchester United, will dominate the game. They've got better front players than Chelsea. Whoever they play up front, Giroud or Abraham, aren't as good as the players up the other end. It's going to be a Manchester United win for me.
All right, let's turn our attention to Saturday's semi-final, Arsenal and Manchester City. Craig, you look at this one on paper, you say, all right, it's going to be a wide open affair, plenty goals. What kind of match you actually think we'll see?
One where City dominates possession and tries to run Arsenal ragged and get them to lose their shape, which has been a problem for Arsenal anyway. Just keeping their shape and having the good shape has been a problem. Arteta's worked on it with the sort of 3-4-3, and they've managed to defend not too bad at times, but other times they've just been ran ragged, and they somehow held on for a result against Liverpool. But we know Liverpool are probably running about 60% of a tank of gas at the moment because they've won the league. Look, the last time Arsenal beat Manchester City, and they haven't even had a draw since, was the semi-final 3 years ago. So maybe that's kind of some sort of omen for them, I don't know. The one thing I would be hanging on to is my front line. I'd be hanging on to my front line, whoever it is. I would imagine it's Aubameyang on the left, probably Lacazette, but it could be Nketiah, and then probably Shaka on the other side. I would be hanging my hat that they're going to be able to come up with something against the Achilles heel of Man City, which I don't need to spell it out, is their back line, their back 4. So they've got a chance, Arsenal, but they're going to have to defend really, really well, which is an issue for them.
What's the best approach here, Robbo? Is it a pragmatic one from Arsenal or to go toe-to-toe with City?
I think they will try and go toe-to-toe to a certain degree, but it's interesting. If they're going to play with the back 3, what happens if Mahrez plays high and wide on the right-hand side? Is Arteta going to ask the wide centre-half to go and face him up and be 1v1 in big areas, which I think Mahrez would love? Or is he going to ask Tierney to come back and be up against Mahrez? And then it makes it a back 4, so he's gone against his shape. But I agree with Craig. If they can get the front 3 involved, whether it be Aubameyang, Lacazette, whether Pepe comes in as well, those 3 can get enough of the ball and cause Man City problems going the other way, they've got a chance. But overall, I think Man City have got the better players. They'll dominate midfield with Xhaka up against Xhaka and probably Ceballos in that midfield area. It's going to be, for me, Man City dominating the game.
Stevie, you think it'll be wide open, entertaining as the teams might suggest?
I think what we'll see is a carbon copy of what happened, particularly with possession against Liverpool during the week. Regardless of how Arsenal want to go about it, they're going to be pushed back because Man City will have the majority of the possession. And Arsenal's problem will be how do they create more than they did against Liverpool. The facts are they didn't have a shot at goal other than the 2 horrendous mistakes Liverpool had for the 2 goals. They couldn't muster a shot at goal. OK, Aubameyang wasn't playing, but really that was the only difference for the normal Arsenal team. So I'm not sure how they create some chances And I don't see how City miss as many chances as Liverpool do. I can't come up with a reason to turn around and tell you Arsenal gets in from this game. I think City comfortably win it.
We had Don and Shaka on the show yesterday. They said the same thing. Craig, you going to give Arsenal any shot here?
Yeah, because if City have another game where they just completely mill teams in terms of possession, but are sloppy in the final third and don't finish them off like they did against Bournemouth, like they've did against many teams. I mean, the scenario, I think, in the League Cup, double-headed against Man United was incredible. I mean, they gave United a pasting at Old Trafford, but they didn't kill them off in terms of they could have been 5 up at half-time. That's the only scenario I see that's going to keep Arsenal in the game, whether Martinez has a great game in goals or Arsenal City are sloppy in that final third, and it gives the front line a chance to hit them on the counter-attack, which we know they're good at and we know City are vulnerable for. It's the only way I see City giving this one up if they don't finish off the chances that they're going to create, because believe me, they're going to create chances in this game.
Robbo, Arsenal or City?
I'm going to go for City. They've got the better players. I think they've got the outstanding manager. Arteta's getting better. He's got.
As we take a look at the Group C standings, TFC on top, 4 points through 2 games. For more on MLS is back, we welcome in Herculez Gomez to the show. Herc, let's talk about one of your former teams, TFC. We just saw the hat trick from Ayo Akinola. This kid has eligibility to play for Canada, to play for Nigeria. One, do you think he's good enough to play for the U.S. national team? And do you think Greg Berhalter should cap time ASAP?
I mean, cap time for what? When's the next game? There's so many different questions. Do I think he's good enough? He's had a handful of games, but man, these handful of games have been very impressive. I understand you're coming off a 4-month layoff with the pandemic and teams are out of shape. They're playing in difficult conditions, but so is, you could do worse than cap time the kid. Definitely, if you want to give him a look, give him a look. I don't see the problem in that.
Herc, you mentioned Josie Altidore. He says he's fit. He says he doesn't have any injuries, but we haven't seen him yet at the MLS is Back tournament. What do you make of it?
Well, I think it's circumstantial. Josie Altidore also showed up late to what was Toronto. Then he had some quarantine issues getting back into Canada. So he's a step behind maybe in the time of training with his teammates. So I don't necessarily find Greg Vanney culpable in not immediately inserting him into the lineup. But you also have to take care of Josie Altidore. He may be physically fit and feel physically fit, but he's had a history of injuries, so you don't want to just throw him back in there in these type of elements and then maybe have him go to waste with what is. There aren't a lot of them, so these ownership groups, these coaches are under immense pressure to play these guys. And if Josie Altidore and his, I believe, $6 million plus a season salary is sitting on the bench and can't get onto the field, that's going to be a huge problem for Toronto FC. So I don't see that happening. I see maybe Greg Vanney finding a way for both of these players to play together, and that would be something.
Let's stick on Josie for a second here. He just did an interview with our colleague Grant Wall, and one of the things he pointed out was his disappointment how the league handled the CBA. In fact, his exact quote was, "Players should move accordingly." Look, it's not the first time that Josie has maybe given us a little hint that he might want to go somewhere else. Do you think there's another step in Josie Altidore's career, whether that's a return to Europe or maybe a sojourn in a place like Mexico?
Before I get to that, I do believe there is another step for Josie Altidore. Let me just say he's not the only one in that camp. Plenty of players are upset with the way the league handled these CBA negotiations, this collective bargaining agreement. They piggyback this MLS is Back tournament upon that. So the players aren't all too pleased with the way that the ownership groups went about their way with these negotiations. Now, that said, Josie Altidore moving abroad, yes, I could definitely see it. I know there's a lot of interest for Josie Altidore in Liga MX. A lot of teams would love to have a player like Josie Altidore. The problem is that salary, that dollar amount. He's under contract. He's making over $6 million a year. You know this, Sebi. Mexico, Liga MX has gone into, we're not going to pay you dollars anymore, we're going to pay you pesos. And with that peso agreement comes in lower salaries. I think we're going to see a turning of the tides in what is Mexican soccer and their willingness to pay these top dollar, or their ability to pay top dollar for top talent. I think those days are long and gone. Certainly a few exceptions. Certainly you're going to see your teams taking the chances and see if they could land another Andre Pierre Gignac, that type of player, or a Guido Rodriguez, that type of player, maybe on the youth end. But I think it'll be very difficult for us to see a Josie Altidore commanding that type of salary. Now, if Josie's interested in a lower salary amount, I tell you what, not only in Liga MX, but in Europe as well, there are a lot of teams who would gladly take him. He's that type of player. Regardless of what you may think of his injury history, I do think there's a market for him.
Herc, great stuff as always. We will continue to check in with you as the MLS is Back tournament. Group E, Columbus perfect through 2 matches with 6 points. Some big news out of Major League Soccer on Friday. MLS announcing that it will delay the inaugural season for 3 of its expansion teams. That's Charlotte, Sacramento, and St. Louis. Charlotte to begin in 2022. Sacramento and St. Louis the year after that. Austin FC, by the way, still slated to start next season. This statement from Don Garber, the MLS commissioner, quote, "We have always taken a thoughtful and strategic approach to our expansion planning and have delivered successful launches for every new club. It is important for each club to take the necessary time to launch their inaugural MLS seasons the way their fans and communities deserve. With the extra year to make up for what has been a challenging 2020, these teams will be well positioned for their debuts and for long. 2004, Leeds United returns to the top flight of English football. Meanwhile, massive fixture on Saturday. Brentford in third taking on Stoke. With a draw or a win, Brentford would pull into second place ahead of West Brom for that second and final automatic promotion. Leaves the A-League table like this. Sydney FC opening up a huge lead over second place Melbourne City. Plenty more A-League action on your ESPN Plus screens this weekend. Wake up early Saturday, Perth Glory, Central Coast Mariners, 3 a.m. in the morning. And then on Sunday, how about some early breakfast, Brisbane Roar and Adelaide United. Wonder if Atalanta is biting their nails. Of course, the 2 sides will meet in the quarterfinals of the Champions League in mid-August. Speaking of Atalanta, they're in action on Saturday on ESPN. You know, anytime they play must-watch TV. Inter Milan in second place, 6 points back of Juve. They're in action on Sunday against Roma. That on ESPN+. ESPN+, also where you'll find a massive fixture Monday, Juventus against Lazio. All right, that's all the time we've got for this edition of ESPN FC. Thanks to everyone who joined us, Stuart Robson, Stevie Nicol, and Hercules Gomez. If you have not quite yet had enough, no worries. Extra time starts now with Craig Burley and Sid Lowe.